his career working on CWD. He now promotes financial rewards to hunters and landowners who take CWD positive deer. He's also a member of Wisconsin's Green Fire, and he serves on the wildlife work group there. Today, they will be discussing how your state might avoid losing its deer herd to CWD like Wisconsin. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Hey, great. Thanks, Torin. And good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for attending today. We chose our title for our talk in hopes of getting your attention and to underscore the seriousness of the CWD problem confronting all of us. Mike and I are retired Wisconsin wildlifers, each with 20 years of experience battling CWD. It was 20 years ago, February 28th, 2002, at our State Wildlife Society meeting, where I had to inform my colleagues that we had just detected 3 CWD positive deer as part of our 2001 deer season surveillance. From that day until I retired in the fall of 2016, I led Wisconsin CWD response as the Wildlife Program Director. My co-presenter, Mike Foy, served as the frontline biologist in the epicenter of our CWD infection zone. Mike has extensive experience working with landowners on targeted removal. Mike and I are here today as concerned conservationists, members of Wisconsin's Green Fire, but we have no longer any official role with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. So why are 2 retired Wisconsin biologists here today instead of out on a frozen lake fishing? Well, simply put, 20 years after CWD was detected in Wisconsin, it's clear it's kicking our butt. As this slide and the next 2 show, CWD prevalence has reached extremely high levels in southwest Wisconsin. I'd like to draw your attention to the yellow outline townships on this map. Those yellow outline areas represent 4 congressional townships in Sauk County. This is the county where I live and where my family hunts deer. CWD prevalence rates are at very high levels in these 4 townships. Prevalence in adult males is near 60%. In adult females, prevalence is near 40%. And for reference, the red line in this slide represents the 30% level that Edmonds et al. Said would likely result in population declines in local Wyoming whitetail deer populations. Sadly, for many Sauk County hunters, the joy of the harvest is short-lived as they receive the test results and learn that they should not consume the deer. More widely, over half of Wisconsin's counties have now detected CWD in the wild, or in captive facilities, or both. Our core messages today are, we urge your states to first maximize the benefits of your targeted removal programs to reduce prevalence and slow disease spread by mobilizing the nation's or your state's landowners and hunters in the battle. This is going to require a greater financial investment and a long management horizon. And then secondly, please vigorously support efforts to quickly forge a national CWD control program to support state management efforts and surveillance needs. The level of management response needed to control CWD is just too expensive for state fish and wildlife agencies or hunters alone to absorb. The federal proposals being advanced thus far are welcomed, but insufficient to match the scale of the problems we confront. At the state level, we should be looking to reinvest some of the economic benefits of our deer economy to the long-term health of our herds. We suspect you've heard the phrase, we don't want to be like Wisconsin. Mike and I agree with you with this sentiment, but we're concerned that despite good intentions, other states appear to be following our path. So where will your state be when you reach your 20th anniversary of CWD detection? We hope all of you will have far fewer detections, and we think you can if you focus on effective strategies to reduce prevalence and spread. If we're unsuccessful, our Wisconsin prominent CWD researcher Dr. Mike Samuel has characterized our future as one where we will see lower deer survival rates, a younger age structure, smaller bucks, fewer hunting participants, and less money for conservation work. I'll turn it over to Mike now.
Thanks, Tom. So you probably don't need to be reminded of what's at risk with this disease. It was great to see Scott report on economic studies. These are just from the Fish and Wildlife and AFWA publication, but I think they get the gist that a lot's at stake. In Wisconsin, our deer economy is very large, and culturally deer are a huge part of our Wisconsin way of life in spite of our provocative title. But without implementing a prevalence control strategy soon, this green economic engine may soon begin to stall. Beyond the economics, we will likely see loss of recreational opportunity and local food resources, damage to tribal, cultural and ecosystem benefits, and declining participation in our successful R3 programs. In taking a quick look at the southeastern states, it appears that CWD may pose a severe threat to your deer economy too, and to deer hunting recreation and your outdoor heritage as well. And then there's the elephant in the room. If you pick up any hunting publication, you will likely see advertisers eager to help you find your personal deer hunting paradise. If your state is anything like Wisconsin, deer hunting is a significant contributor to rural land values. As CWD eats away at our deer herds, it seems likely that it will eventually erode some of the value of our land as well. Few attempts have been made to quantify the economic value of this loss. They will likely be substantial. If just $100 per acre on average is lost from the value of Wisconsin's deer range, which fully includes 2/3 of our state's area, that means $2.3 billion will vanish from the pockets of our landowners. And if rural property values fall, property tax receipts will soon follow, which in many states fund public schools, police and fire, and local infrastructure. So what should we be doing about CWD? Of course, keep CWD out if you don't have it. But for those of us that do, our first recommendation is that you not rely on miracles. Sonia did a really good job of covering some of the basics of this. And, you know, we're not saying that you should not have a robust research program looking for genetic solutions, vaccines, treatments, but, you know, they're likely a long ways away, and we should not postpone practical disease management now. As stated previously, Tom and I strongly believe that we should be focused on implementing effective management to reduce CWD prevalence and distribution. People will groan at this, but the biology is pretty straightforward. It's primarily a frequency transmitted disease. As best as I can tell, we need to increase the removal of CWD positive deer from the landscape. Ideally, we will remove more sick deer than are created by various transmission mechanisms in play, informed by strong surveillance programs that quickly detect new infections. But while the biology is becoming better understood, the sociology of effective removal of CWD positive deer is not. We applaud the efforts of the National Deer Association and many others that are ramping up outreach efforts to create greater awareness of the threat of this disease and encouraging the hunting community to use its power to push back on CWD's advance. We also stand in deep admiration of Illinois, our sister state to the south, who continued on after Wisconsin had to shut down our targeted removal. Through sheer will and a tireless commitment by staff, they have operated this nation's longest duration targeted removal program to suppress CWD prevalence and distribution. This story needs even greater visibility. Beyond Illinois, there are other examples from the Midwest and Western Canada showing we can double or triple the rate of CWD positive deer removal if we focus our efforts. And we applaud Southeast states that are using targeted removal now or include the option for future use in their CWD management plans. As Tom indicated, I was directly involved in our targeted removal efforts in the early years of our response. I know what it's like to be away from my family, spending much of the night in a deer blind for months on end. But I also know the deep heartache when CWD blew right by us without the resources to expand our efforts. Achilles heel of many direct agency targeted removal programs is that they are personnel intensive, they enjoy limited access to land, they're expensive per sick deer removed, and they can evoke strong resentment among neighbors and hunters. In short, we question if they are sustainable for the decades that we'll have to be in this fight. If we were dealing with a habitat issue, our planning would automatically include provisions on enlisting the help of private landowners and conservation organizations to address the habitat bottleneck. As Whit Fosberg mentioned in his plenary session talk, you don't have to look further than the 2018 Farm Bill to see the importance we place on this strategy. According to the Congressional Budget Office, we will spend $60 billion to help landowners do important conservation work over 10 years. If we are okay with compensating private landowners who restore needed habitat or improve wildlife quality, water quality, why would we hesitate to use this same mechanism to prevent the spread of CWD across the countryside? There are likely many ways to harness the power of thousands of private landowners and their hunters to help us. But our proposal hopefully maximizes their freedom of choice and effectiveness while minimizing agency regulation and administrative costs. Its main components are to offer a compelling incentive to landowners, hunters, and even small business sample collectors for every CWD positive deer harvested. Participation should remain completely voluntary. Special regulations are largely unnecessary, except where useful to provide extra harvest opportunity. The agencies would remain controlling season bag tags as usual to prevent overharvest and maintain herd sustainability. And finally, successful hunters and landowners would certify harvest locations on an affidavit in the presence of a conservation officer to prevent fraud and to maintain the integrity of our spatial harvest data. Based upon prior presentations, when we get to this point, our audience starts wondering, how the heck are you going to pay for all this? Our short answer is we don't know. But it's clear that none of the federal legislation proposed to date comes close to meeting the need. This is a big problem, a huge problem, and it's going to require a big solution. At the state level, bonding is often a tool of choice to fund the upfront investment needed for big projects. But whatever solution gets chosen, it will require approval by the public and our elected legislatures. This list of possible funding options will need to be evaluated fully to find an acceptable solution. Are healthy deer herds worthy of public investment? We certainly think they are, and that they will pay back generous dividends. Some segment of society tend to pigeonhole deer and deer hunting as a discretionary recreational activity. We would disagree, but if you had to argue for the support on that basis alone, there are no shortage of examples where public funding was spent on recreational activities that are near and dear to us. Just consider the $7 billion in public funding that went into these pro sports arenas and stadiums in your Southeast states in recent decades. Take us home, Tom.
Thanks, Mike. And as I close our presentation, we again want to thank the audience for joining us today. The Southeast Deer Study Group may well be this nation's premier gathering of deer managers and researchers. Our hope is that our perspectives on CWD management will find favor with this group, and that you will work to advance them in your state's organizations and at the national level. During Wisconsin's 2018 youth deer hunt, Caleb Dampf harvested this nice yearling buck. It turned out to be a CWD positive deer, and Caleb's second CWD positive deer in his short hunting career. At age 14, Caleb should not have to be thinking about how to stop CWD. That's our job. We are the caretakers of the nation's deer herds and conservation policies. To that end, let me repeat our core messages. we are urging you to maximize the benefits of your targeted removal programs by mobilizing the nation's landowners and hunters in the battle. And number two, to vigorously support efforts to quickly forge a national CWD control program to support state management efforts and surveillance needs. The level of management response needed to control CWD is just too expensive for state fish and wildlife agencies and hunters alone to absorb. Our profession has faced big conservation challenges before, and we can step up to meet the CWD challenge if we work together. From Mike and I and our colleagues at the Wisconsin Green Fire, we're ready to pitch in. Back to you, Torrin.
I appreciate it, gentlemen, and good timing. Great presentation. I appreciate the passion and enthusiasm there. We do have a couple questions that popped up here, so I'm going to read those off to you, and you guys can distribute those however you see fit. The first, have any of the predicted economic losses or reduction in hunter participation been experienced in Wisconsin in the CWD zones?
I'll take a stab at that, Mike. So Dr. Robert Holzman is our on-staff sociologist and has just recently finished a survey of Wisconsin deer hunters, kind of examining that question. It's my understanding that that report should be out within the next few weeks. In general, CWD is not listed by hunters as the reasons that they're discontinuing hunting. But it's pretty understandable when you look at where the geographic location of CWD is in our state, and most of hunters, just like in Sonia's experiment, aren't dealing with CWD on a regular basis. In the counties where CWD is pervasive, CWD jumps way up the list in terms of a reason for leaving hunting.
Yeah, good. Another question here. With CWD expanding so quickly in the past 20 to 30 years, do you think it's too late in many areas to make a difference in regards to CWD prevalence?
I'll take that, I guess. That's the open question, and many of our colleagues are convinced it is too late. I guess I would just say that Tom and I have, we're not willing to give it up. You know, 5 of the 10 deer we shot on our little farm this year were sick, but you know, that farm has been in our family for nearly 50 years now, and it's just too personal for us to walk away from. So we think this can help, because we've seen many examples where we can really ramp up the rate of positive removal, and that's really without even using really sophisticated statistical tools and prediction things that are done in many industries. So I say no, and I would wait to be convinced that it is too late.
Torrin, I will just add that using the sparks and the raging fire analogy, you've got to attack the raging fire anyway. You've got to beat it down, drive prevalence down, so it's throwing fewer sparks out for you to deal with. Otherwise, you're just never going to gain anything. So, and I do believe that the leading researchers believe that we can drive prevalence down.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. There is another question in that question-A box for you guys. I'll let you guys handle that though, so we can get on to our next speaker here. I appreciate it so much, gentlemen. All right. Up next, we have Mark Schwabenlander, and he's the Chronic Wasting Disease Research and Outreach Program Manager at the Minnesota Center for Prion Research and Outreach. Mark's research interests include zoonotic infectious diseases, translational research, One Health, and human dimensions of wildlife and disease management. Mark will be talking about the comparison of